Hello everyone, welcome back to This Old TJ. Today's episode, I'm going to be trying to get as much wrapped up on my RockHard 4x4 rear tire carrier bumper installation as possible. If you saw the previous episode, I have finished installing the entire rear bumper. That took longer than expected. So today I'm trying to get it finished up with getting the tire carrier installed and on. So they say to start this part out, we're going to take their little tabbed nut that they have. Has a slot in the rear that slips through. Then the striker for the latch drops in, threads into this, and bolts down. But I've already found out that the nut has been powder coated on the inside, so it's probably going to take a little more force than I was expecting. But we'll get it in here to get things started. So there is a slot machined in to the rear of the bumper. So we've got that started. And now with the Torx 50, we can start tightening this down. And hopefully it'll tighten without having to tap that out. And it looks like it is going to. All right, now it's tight. They say back it off just a hair so that it can slip a little bit side to side in the hole. So that part's done. Next up, we're going to move to the other side of the bumper. And on the passenger side, we will start by pulling the protective cap off the threaded rod. And here you can see that is a absolute solid rod all the way through here, so I have no worries about it holding the weight of this thing. Have the passenger side tail light removed, so that'll allow me to set the carrier down over this. Next thing they recommend doing is placing the shims on. They don't specifically call out a 35-inch tire, but they say for a fully loaded 37 with the rack and carriers, for jerry cans, on the big tire, 5, maybe 6. So they call out 4 for all of that with a factory size up to a 33. So I'm going to split the difference and start out here with 5 of the shims on this. But before I do, this is set for a little bit. And it's got a little bit of surface rust on here. I'm going to grab a Brillo pad and clean that thing up real quick. All right, I know I said Brillo pad, but what I truly meant was some green Scotch-Brite. So we'll get that on here and see if we can knock off just a little bit of that surface rust. This is going to take grease after we're done, so I doubt it would really rust anyway. That should have enough of it off. We can proceed. So I got my 5 shims set up. We'll simply drop those on. Then they have 2 large spacers that are what the grease seal actually seats on. So it does not really look like either edge is beveled, one, maybe very slightly. So I'll drop my spacer on. And then next step will be setting the carrier down on here. So I'll grab the carrier and we'll get it on. And it looks like it's either going to have to be straight out or at a 90-degree angle. Otherwise that locking pin isn't going to clear. All right. So now that we have the carrier on, the next thing they say to install is the next big thick spacer, which goes in on your grease seal. So we'll get that in here. Let's see if I can work it down into the seal. And it looks like I may have just run into my first fitment issue. With the cover on, without a body lift, raising the bumper up so it is flush with the rear cross member, looks like this pin is going to hit. So either I'm not down all the way on the lower spacer, which I'll check, which it is down on all the way. Or I'm going to have to trim this section of the cover plate to get this to clear. So there's always some little hidden gotcha. Didn't really recall hearing that one mentioned in the video, but hey, here it is. And it's not hitting by much, so I may take my oscillating cutoff tool and see if I can just trim this straight across and get that to clear. So I got my oscillating tool. We're going to go ahead and try and shave this where I can visibly see it hitting and gain the clearance we're needing. Alright, now that that's shaved back a bit, we can go ahead and see if this will now swing closed past there without the interference. And it looks like I may need just a little bit more clearance on the actual hinge portion itself, so I'm going to try and shave that down just a hair. And then we'll test the closure again. And it looks like it's going to need a little bit more clearancing for that to go. With the carry-on, I'm not too worried about taking a little bit off of the hinge. I'll give it another test swing, see how it's looking now. Looks like it's still hitting early on. So I need to come back a little bit more. Go down just a hair more. And I may change tools for doing this. Cover the post because this is going to make a few more chips come through here, but it's going to work a lot faster. So now with a rotary grinder and a carbide burr, I should be able to contour this down fairly quickly. Now we'll make another test pass. Almost. Still hitting right up close. I mean, at first contact really is where it's hitting. So come in and take a little bit more out. that certainly took care of getting the hinge cover off. All right, we'll give it another swing, see how it looks. If the camera pick it up, but it hits still right at the back end there. So, but the front side looks like it is definitely clearing with some room to spare. So take off that last little edge at the back, and I think we'll be good. All right, we'll get another test swing. But first, let's make sure I get that spacer seated down in there as far as possible. And it looks like it clears pretty well, but still making a little contact right there where the clean spot is. So I'll take a little more off there. And we'll see if we swing past now. And now it does appear there's plenty of clearance. It's still a little tight right here at the front edge. I'll go ahead and clearance a little bit more there, and then we'll probably be good. It's definitely a pinch point. I wouldn't want to get my finger caught in. But other than that, it looks like it is clearing fairly well. So I will grab just a little bit of touch-up paint and kind of put over the top of that and protect it from rusting, and then we'll get on with it. Yeah, I think instead of masking this off, I'm just going to try and punch through that one little section through some paper towel. So most of it's going to be covered by what's left of the trim piece anyway. And we'll wipe some of the excess off. Or rather, maybe a lot of excess. So I'll come back at this a little different direction. I was trying to hold the towel underneath here. And see if I can get a little bit out of the inside there. And I think we're good. Now to finish trimming down the cover a bit, so I can already tell that's gonna still need a little more clearancing. I'm just gonna try and take it back a little and straight out the back and square it up some. Alright, it's back on. Feels fairly firm. If I get any suspicious rattles, it's one of the places I'll come check. We'll go ahead and test the clearance on this. And that is definitely coming around all the way. So you can see the locking pin sets below a hair, comes around. Not sure what it's contacting there. Oh, I know what's going on. The top spacer that keeps everything squared up moved. And I think what it's rolling on now is the bottom cut on the plastic, so I'll go ahead and clear that out. Should eliminate any rubbing we have. And the trim should now match the contour of the hinge. And I don't see the pin rolling anywhere. It swings all around past the latch level. So I think that part's good. So if you are planning on putting one of these on, and you're going to do what I did and put it in the 2 bottom slotted mounting holes, which raises the bumper up. So it does set up flush with the rear cross member. Be aware that's going to get in your way, at least on the TJ. It still touches just a bit right at the front of that trim. So while I'm in here, might as well do it right the first time. So no spinning on the lock pin, so no contact anywhere there. I think we are good. Okay, at this point we're probably about 30 minutes into this in total. Time spent, and would have been faster if not for this little slight clearance issue here I hadn't anticipated. So you know, if you're watching this, look out for that if you're raising this thing up off the low setting. So they say the next thing we should do is go ahead and get the big cap nut on top of here. And they also mention that this is a very convenient place to store your extra shims if you have any, which is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and set the 1 extra shim there. Then I'm going to break out the separated package, which is the latch assembly and that top cap. So we'll get it out of here and get it mounted up on there. So we will set the latch to the side for now, which is the handle and the latch assembly here. Let's see what other goodies are in this package. We do wrap these things well and use plenty of tape. So here's our end cap for the other end of the bumper after we get the latch assembly in. So we'll set it with the other side. And then we have our big cap. You can see the cap is machined to have a slight overhang to shield it from some elements. And since this is aluminum on steel, I'm going to go ahead and get a little anti-seize and put on there, just because it's a habit of mine. And that glob that came out was way too much, but hopefully I won't be wearing it, so it should be okay. And it is not wanting to thread on well. So I'll set it to the side, grab a paper towel, wipe some of the anti-seize off, see if that helps any. I'm doubting it, but you never know. And this is usually the point where I would end up wearing the anti-seize. And there's still plenty of anti-seize down in the threads themselves. There we go. It may just be I wasn't giving enough squeeze on here. And then they say in their video for tightening this thing up to use a large crescent wrench. So I have a large crescent wrench from a previous Jeep project. I think it's starting to tighten down a little bit. Definitely getting tighter. I'm trying to see if I can get it just enough further turn to get the etched in logo at least parallel one way or the other. So then we'll test the swing on a good thing again. And it's tight enough I can feel like some preload on the bearings, so I think we're good there. Then next it says we're going to put the grease zert in. And go ahead and pump a little grease in there, which out of the whole package of parts, the grease zert will be about the tiniest thing in there. But I found it. And these are normally almost like a self-tapping type of thing, and it looks like that hole does in fact have some powder coat on it as well. So we'll see how well these threads hold up. And looks like that's about an 8mm. You can actually see threads back in there, but I think the powder coat is keeping them from biting. Alright, I think we might have to get a knife blade or something to carve that out just a little bit to get this thing to start. Just got a little bit too much powder coat around there to seat in. I got a little shaved out. We'll see if that was enough. I think it might have bit some thread, and we're about to find out. Not quite enough. That time, it's acting like it's wanting to thread in. Well, it's not pretty, but it's in. So I'll see if I can get a grease gun on there and get some grease in this thing. I don't have a functional grease gun at the moment, so I'm going to put this on the list of things left to be done. When you ever do these kind of projects, it's not a bad list to keep. You know, basically just something to say that this hasn't been touched yet. Don't forget. Granted, they're not high-speed bearings, but I still don't want them getting corroded. So I don't want to forget about it. And we can move on over to the latch side. So next up, say we're going to join the latch handle to the actual latch. Then this whole latch assembly slips underneath the carrier. It has a backing plate that goes on the inside of the swing arm tube. Then the bolts will go up from the bottom, thread into that backing plate. So we'll go ahead with the latch assembly. So it's going to be the two button head bolts will come through from the rear side of the latch, right, and then each button head bolt has a lock nut to hold it in place. So we'll get the first one started, and we'll get the second one started. And mine ended up being a 5/32 Allen and then a 7/16. It's not a half, so I'll grab a ratchet to get this down on here, and that's it on the latch assembly. So it's a double latch like your car door. At the first click, second click, release, so the latch is ready to go. So we've got the 3 bolts. These will go up from the bottom of the latch. The latch itself sits under the swing out carrier. And then they will go into the corresponding slip in backing plate that slips inside of the tire carrier and then bolted from the bottom. So I will locate that little strip of metal. We'll get that on next. So again, to kind of show how this works, the latch itself will go up through from the bottom. It slips in due to the latch mechanism. These bolts then will go up into the inside of the frame. And once they are in, these will thread in to this little block. So, and then to get the proper orientation on this, it's going to be the 2 offset to a ledge go towards your vehicle. The one that's centered goes pretty much center. So it's going to slip in just like this and then line up over those holes. And then I'll see if I can take one of the bolts here and try and get it lined up somewhat. So at this point, that front bolt hole is aligned. So we'll go ahead and get it in there. There's the first one started. And that's not one to there, maybe it's going to. It's one to thread very smoothly. But now it is. And we'll get our third one in that rearmost position. And we'll grab the ratchet and go ahead and get these things cinched up in here. Yeah, these long shank bolts are going to take forever. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my little impact driver. So now they should go on fairly quickly. But now I'm actually questioning the length of the bolts. So I'm going to spin one out and show you the difference. This one's got the shank on it. These were the only three. There was a set of three. But since I'm not certain, I'm going to resort to watching the instructions. And I know everybody's fond of just recording a video and sending a QR code versus printing them out. But I may be old school. I'm one of those guys that still likes the printed diagram that shows this bolt, this washer, goes through these things, this washer, lock nut, lock washer, nut, whatever. It just makes it a whole lot faster for me. So here we go, instructions in hand.
Go ahead and tighten these screws using a 4mm Allen wrench and a 7/16. Once you locate the nut plate, you'll see how there's 3 holes in the nut plate. Now they're not lined up, but they do match the holes in the latch. What you're going to do is you're going to take this nut plate, you're going to slide it in until they line up with the bolt holes down below. Take the latch, slide the handle of the latch through the opening slot in the bumper, and bolt that up through the bottom of the swing arm into that nut plate. Now use a 1/2-inch in wrench or 1/2-inch socket and tighten these bolts down. Now, I want you to just snug them up. They don't have to be over tightened.
No mention
handle nut plate. Now,
of what bolts to use. So yeah, I'm going to disassemble the thing, take another closer look, and see if I can eyeball it. And what I'm worried about on this is the length of the shank on this bolt. How far it protrudes through here. That looks like that is more than the thickness of that backing plate. So it could be that this is one of the places to use one of the washers that fit this size bolt. So we'll go back, do the same thing over again. This time we'll use a washer on each one, see if that makes a difference. So it looks like eyeballing it here, just holding it to the end. The thickness is probably about the exact amount of that washer between that shank getting up into that little bolt backing plate and tightening up. That seemed to take care of it. It is on there definitely good and tight. So now we can go ahead and adjust it to the actual latch pin. I got the latch installed, cinched down, use the washers under, and run into the next little snag here in the tire carrier installation. And if you look, everything's in, set up, and it does not latch. The reason why it's not latching is because the striker pin, the top of the striker pin, and the latch assembly right here happen to be pretty much the exact same height now. So what this does is, let's see if I can get a little better angle with the camera here. When you attempt to close it, it's not going to latch, it's too high. And I know RockHard in their instructions say you want the bottom of the tire carrier to hit the hard plastic insert, and if you look, I can get a fingertip up under there pretty easily. I think the idea is the weight of everything mounted on the carrier will lower this thing. But I don't think even with a 35-inch tire mounted on here, the jerry can racks and even the carrier basket is going to bring this thing down nearly enough to begin to touch on this or to lower that striker pin. If I throw all my weight on here and push this thing down, and I'm about 250 pounds, that's still not enough to get this thing down to just shut on its own without like doing some extra shoving. So we come back over to the shim side, and you can see that the spacer is pressed up into the grease seal. I went with 5 shims, as I said, 5 to 6 for the 38-inch tire, and thought, well, 35, the extra weight, the carrier, I'll put it on there. Put on the 5, and I'm still sitting way too high. So now I'm going to have to pull the whole swing out carrier back off and remove some shims. And ideally, I believe I want to remove enough shims so that this thing comes down and either barely touches this before it latches. So that's a pretty sizable gap, and that's my fingertip wedged in there. And when we come back over to the shim side, you can see that basically my fingertip is about the exact same amount of space between the bumper and the carrier. So I'm going to pull the big cap back off the top, lift this thing back off. So I'm guessing it's probably a good thing I couldn't get it to take grease, otherwise I'd be dealing with a greasy mess while disassembling this. So if you're doing this, one tip I would say is check everything before you pump that thing full of grease. So next thing I've got to do is decide how many shims am I going to pull out. Am I going to pull out 2 shims, 3 shims? And I think honestly I'm going to pull 3 shims out and drop this thing back on here with only 3 shims in there. And then come back over, check my clearance. It should definitely drop me enough that I will latch. Whether or not I'll be touching on this plate or not, I'm not sure. So we'll get the tripod moved around here and yank this nut. We'll pull this off, set it back on with less shims, see how it looks then, and go from there. So the big nut is off. The one extra shim that I'd stacked under there came off. It's probably the anise, like half sticking it to the inside of the cap. So we'll swing this thing out, lift it off, and then remove some shims. See how it looks then. All right, so this one the spacer stayed in. I'll pull that big thick spacer out, and I'm gonna go ahead and drop it down to just 2 shims on there from the original 5. Drop the big grease seal spacer back in and drop it back down on here. Put our extra shims back on top, and I'm just going to give it a quick test so you can still see the clearancing. The hinge would have been required even at the lower setting here. Might not have had to clearance quite as much on the outside, but on the inside we're still going to need that on this high setting for the bumper. And with this setting, it does now at least latch. So latched very well. I've got just that little tiny gap of space in there. So I think with the smaller gap, the fact it now latches, I'm going to go ahead and get the big nut back on here. We got our extra shims on the top. Just said that was a good place, you know, to store them. That should press the big spacer that hits the grease seal back in. So we'll get this back on here and we'll see how it looks now. And if it doesn't go down and cover the entire top of that, I'll probably pull some of those shims out and just put them in a Ziploc to store them separately. That does leave a pretty sizable gap. So let's take this thing back off, take another look here. And pull a couple of them out. That gets it down pretty low. There's not a lot of gap in there at this point. I'm going to pull one more out just to see if we can get a little closer. That's looking pretty solid. So we'll go ahead and tighten this thing down a bit. Give it maybe another quarter turn here. It's definitely latching now. So go ahead and give it the full open, the full swing till it hits that lock pin. So I ended up with 2 shims on the bottom, and then I left the 1 extra shim on the top. I got the cap to set down where I like it. So I've got the 3 extra shims. I'm gonna bag in a little Ziploc snack bag and just mark them with a Sharpie as tire carrier, shims for RockHard, and throw them in my little bucket of extra Jeep project parts that were left over, so I know what they came from, what they were for. And we should be ready to move on with this. All right, so the next step they had on this assembly was loosen your hitch pin up just enough it can slip around a little bit. So we're latching on now. Got a little bit of play, but there's a spacer to take care of that. So we're going to loosen this, open it back up, and then try and tighten this shim down with this T50 Torx and get it back snugged up. That's fairly snug. And now we latch. Still just a slight gap over that block, but not much. Hopefully with the weight of the tire, it'll bring that down a little more when it's fully loaded, but at least it's latching. So worst case, end up having to pull the whole assembly back off, yank that one other shim out, leave just the one shim on the bottom. That would probably get it down to where it touches on the block. Or the block itself is actually bolted down from the top. I can just yank the two bolts here if I need to, put some washers underneath and bring it up just a hair, which would probably be a whole lot easier to do than taking off the far side hinge. So I think for now we're good enough. We can move on with the project here. Next up, I'll grab the little backing plate that goes on, get it in here. Before I do that, I think I'm going to go ahead and actually pull these 3 bolts out of the bottom, put a single drop of blue Loctite on there and put them back in to make sure they're not going to go anywhere anytime soon, just with vibrations. Oh, here's another thing with this, I just now noticed with this higher hitch carrier. It has a definite depth to it, which is a lot shallower probably than most things would be. So for my little basket I would slide in here, probably going to be okay. Where the other one was mounted lower, probably had a little more clearance on the back side. But let's get these bolts out, get some Loctite on them and get them back in there. Got my little tube of the Loctite blue. You can see where it says blue on the label. So even though it's the red tube, it is the blue Loctite. So we'll just do these one at a time. And if you're new to the Loctite thing, you do not need a lot of this stuff. So I'm going to take the end of the bolt here and essentially just put a little drop on, let it run in, do its thing. That should be all it needs to stay in there for a long time. Same thing, single drop here. It'll work its way around the threads. And then we'll get the last one out. Get a drop on there. And the latch assembly should be now in there solidly for, well, until we ever need to remove it, which I doubt we ever will. Firmly on the latch. No problems there. We'll get that in plate, get it tapped in here next. In their video, they say to take the lock plate, slip it over, get it into place, and then get a rubber mallet to tap it in. But my little end cover plate slips right in, and it is going to need no tapping at all because it just flat out sets loose on there. So I guess next issue, what to do with this. I will probably see if I've got some super weather strip adhesive and see if I can put a thin coat along the inside where the rail on this would ride. Then maybe put a little bit right along the edges and just set it on there and see if it'll glue itself in place. Functionality wise, doesn't seem to affect anything. Longevity wise, this piece staying on here, I'm not so sure. So let me see if I've got some of that super weather strip adhesive on hand. Hopefully I do. If not, it'll be on the list of things for the parts store. I do have a tube. It does not feel like it's hardened up. So this 3M black super weather strip and gasket adhesive, it's good stuff. So now, to see if we can get a little ribbon of it in there to help us hold things in place. I don't know if you can see already how gooey this stuff is. It's almost making its own like film all the way around here. So if I can just... So we've got a little on the inside. I'll go ahead and put a light ribbon around the outside of the plate here. Stuff smells about like model glue. So let's slip this thing up on here. Get it in there. And you can see a little bit of it's protruded around the edges, so it does have a good seal. And now we just let that set and dry. After it dries, I'm going to take a razor blade and try and trim down the little bit that came out extra on top, right along the edge here, and then down the edge. But them plates should be good. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. This stuff has always been pretty solid. So if you don't have a tube, get yourself a tube. You never know when you'll need it, but when you need it, it's good to have on hand. So I believe now our next bit is going to be to come around, and this bracket holds a little rubber puck that's like a standoff for the carrier to butt up against when it's closed. So I'll grab that and the attachment hardware for it, and we'll get that on next. So the little standoff comes packaged separately. We'll set here. We have a button head bolt. We'll hold it in, slips through. Then on the back side, it has a lock nut. So I don't really think we need a washer on here. I don't think they called one out. So now it's what size hex head does it use? Hardware kit came with mine. The 3/16 hex head. We'll get the bolt side. We'll get it through the standoff, and then backing it is a 1/2 inch lock nut. And I can see the rubber starting to bulge out a little bit, so I know it's pulled back in there well. So we'll check the swing again here, see how the latch fitment works. Just going to give it a little light push. And it latched on pretty well, but I can actually see a little bit of gap between that bumper and the carrier and the latch. So we'll probably loosen this thing up, shim it with a washer or two behind the bumper and the bracket, and we'll try it again. You can see it's rubber on the back, and I assume that's captured around a body washer, but if not, a couple regular washers ought to hold it off enough to get the job done. Did find a pack of fender washers, 5/16, 1 1/4 inch, so we'll tear into it. Again, this is where it's nice. You do enough projects over the years, you end up with a few extra parts here and there. And that's a matter of how far I want to shim this off. Given the gap we had, I'll drop 2 on there. Just slip the thing in and close it up and see if that comes close to taking up that space. Now we're a little too far off. So we'll drop it down to 1. And just start the lock nut. Try again. And that seems to have gotten it nice and firm. There's really not a lot of wiggle now. You shut the thing with a little authority and it latches and holds tight. So go ahead and tighten this down, and then we can move along to the next part here. It feels good and snug. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. So let's shut the thing again. That seems to have taken care of it. You can see it's touching there now. It has contact. Let's see if I can open the latch just a little bit. And you can see before it latches on there, it bumps. I'll slide the light underneath, see if we got any light gap between the two. And it doesn't appear to be any light coming between that snubber and the carrier. So I think this part of it is solid. So next up, we'll move on to setting up the tire carrier on the back portion. Then we got the tailgate bar, which also reuses a couple of the factory bumpers to support the upper portion of it. Next up is our little cross tailgate support bar, one of the rubber snubbers that was factory mounted here. We'll mount to this, giving some back pressure support on the swing out carrier. Now, when I went to set mine up, one of the first things I found out, and again, not knowing who exactly owned Jeep in 2005, was how much cost savings were they going through? Because you can see the clear paint marker from where there could have been a third bolt holding the spare tire carrier on. However, there was not. Also, the bolts that were included in my kit from RockHard for this, the 2 inner ones are SAE, I think a 5/16. The longer bolts they sent for the outside were also SAE. And I found out on mine, these are actually metric. They're an M6-1.0. So I went down to the local hardware store, picked up a couple of stainless bolts to go in my 2 ends that will fit. And since I was there, I also got stainless to hold the 2 inner ones on. So hopefully this is where the project maybe starts getting a little easier, and after a trip to the hardware store for proper bolt sizes. So with no inner bolt, I'll start with the one closest to the passenger side, that is the larger size. Then next up we will have the outers. And these outers I picked up, they're an M6-1.0 by 40. And 40 may end up not being quite long enough because of the way the nut recess is kind of inside the tailgate. But we'll find out. I'm just putting a flat washer on these. they're not holding anything. I get lock washers on the two inners. But if these will go through and get enough bite to thread in, they do. But the next thing I'm encountering here, fitment wise, is this is hitting on each end. And if we look right here, you can see it rides right on the tailgate trim. And that ends up having it stand off a hair. So I have to figure out how to deal with this. Probably going to pull it, grab my oscillating tool and shave down the end of this cap to see if I can get it to set back flush. So again, it's always the little things that seem to make these projects take longer than they should. All right, I got the Sharpie, so I will mark my corner that's getting trimmed. Pull the two inner bolts back out. All right, so I got the oscillating tool back out. I'm simply going to try and shave this trim cap off here at like a 45-degree angle if possible to get this thing to fit. And doing this may be easier said than done, but we'll give it a try anyway. Again, all we're trying to do is get this thing to set flush against the tailgate, so I don't need any big massive clearancing space. And that is now enough to let it set flush against the tailgate. So back to our inner bolts. And now these outer bolts, which again were the M6-1.0, and I'm using a 40, but what I didn't realize when I was at the parts store getting a 40 was that even though this protrudes through the bar, it may or may not get deep enough in there to really get a good bite on the threads because they kind of set recessed under the tailgate, but we will see. Looks like I can still get several threads in. What I'm going to do on these is just put a tiny drop of thread locker right at the tip of the thread and snug them in there, and they're not going anywhere. And by tiny drop, I just wiped the nozzle of the thing off on the thread. I didn't actually put a full-blown drop on. It's literally just a little drop. And for tightening on these, I'm going with not very much. That's hand tied on a 1/4 inch drive. That should be more than plenty. So now we'll move on to our last side. Do the same thing. Just rub our threads. You can see I got a little bit in there. That's all it'll ever need. All right, that bar is in there solid. It's going nowhere. In fact, I'll go ahead and slam it shut here. Next up was what to do about not having that center bolt, which I really don't think is a big deal, One of the things that occurred to me is I have a nut zert kit, and I also have M6 inserts. So what I'm going to do, instead of using their self-tapping screw to mount that rubber bumper back on here, since this is pretty much centered up on the tailgate, I'm going to put an M6 1.0 thread insert in here, and then reuse the factory, the true factory hardware, the bolt, the bumper, and everything to put that on instead of just drilling through with the self-tapping screw. And if you've never seen these things, there's not much to them. It's a little insert, threads on, kind of like the same concept as a rivet. This part collapses where the knurls are, so that will collapse around the material and sandwich it in place. And the drill size on this from the factory, it's not super tight, but it doesn't have any wiggle room at all. So it should be, and this isn't one that takes any torque or anything, so this should be more than adequate. So we will get this in. Thread in a little deeper, so I want to make sure that thing is on there very snug. And there you have it. One fresh nut insert. It uses the same size mounting as the factory hardware. So now I should be able to grab my rubber snubber, but I do want to get the one that has the factory bolt still in it, and we'll get it clamped down on there. So the first trowel fitment for this thing, I'm looking, and it got a little bit of rubber that protrudes off the back of this thing from the casting. So I'm hoping that'll collapse. We will this thing up here and start spinning it in. Now maybe time to go ahead and grab the Torx bit. So there we have it, one crossbar now assembled. Next up is with it assembled, the snubber on, like they show in their video instructions. Does the thing close and latch? As you've seen where we've run into the problems with that already, but this will be a quick, easy test. The answer is no, it does not. That bumper stands out on there so far that, if you look, there is no chance that thing is ever closing. Right, we got over an inch gap at the bottom. So looks like the snubber has to come back off. And again, this was direct reusing factory hardware. So you can see I got the factory M6 pointy tip. Since I have 3 of these things, I could probably start shaving it down a bit now just with that oscillating cutter and see if we can get it down to where it'll actually close. So I'm going to try and make my cut line on this. I'm going to try and have the cut line be as straight down this factory marking as possible. And hopefully that's not taking off too much, but hopefully it'll be enough that I can get the gate to shut with that on there. Because I know this is part of their like anti-rattle system, or however they word it. Well, now that it smells like there's been a burnout contest going on in the garage, and I have little bits of rubber shavings everywhere. Let's see if it shuts. It does shut. It does have contact. It's not really snug. The bottom I can see a little bit of daylight through, but the top looks like it's pretty snug in there. So Try and get a better shot. I was talking about it. Put some light behind there. You kind of see that little light gap between the bottom and the top. But so for now, I think that's going to work. Give it a little hard shut. Yeah, the top is definitely making good contact with this. And it's the bottom that has a little bit of a light gap, but not much. And that's just, I think, from where I tried to trim it up and make it look pretty. So next step, and maybe this is the part where we get to something that's easy and doesn't take hours longer than expected, is the actual tire carrier mount. We're onto the tire carrier mount now. We've got everything else behind buttoned up, the crossbar. Use that nutsert to put in an M6-1 to reuse the factory bumper, shave the bumper down, and now we're on to mounting the tire carrier. Their instructions say top hole 37s, 38s, middle hole would be like 35, 34s, I guess. Then so on and so forth down the line. You can go down as long as you want. Can't use the bottom hole though, because that is now occupied by the bumper and back. So I'll grab the big heavy mount and we'll start seeing what type of bolt holes line up and are available. And I believe I'm going to go ahead and follow their recommendations again and go with the next to top hole, which they said would be good for up to a 35. So that is what I plan on running on here when this is said and done. Yeah, I suspected it's going to need a nut to keep it from flying off. So drop another washer. And I will note that they send hardware for this. I had excess hardware from previous projects, so I'm using mine, so it all kind of matches out the back. More of a vanity thing than a functional thing, I guess. But and both sizes on these, both my hardware and the one that they included, are 5/8 on the head, 11/16 on the nut side. So I'll go ahead and get these things tightened down. Alright, so the backing plate is now on there, nice and snug. Now the next part is the plate that goes in the front, which this one we will not snug down because we have to check for tire clearance and fit. So tire carrier, I think for me to start with the test fitment on it, I'm going to run it one hole forward of all the way to the rear. just to see. And they do say in the video that this part may be a bit of trial and error and back and forth, and I definitely believe that. But I'll just go with the rearward bolts for now to hold it in place. I don't even think I'm gonna bother with the washers for the moment. I'm just gonna spin the nuts up on there. Well, finally, I think we did hit the easy part of this. So we now have the carrier on, mounted up. Next step is figuring out where our wheel stud spacing goes, pulling those through. And once that's done, we should be ready to test mount a tire. And one thing I want to do on this, at least for the time being, and these are replaceable later, you can get new studs, press the old ones out, change your spacing. But for now, since I'm running these JK wheels on the Spider Track spacer, and I got the Amazon cheapie here to be my knockoff, is I want to line these up so it looks like I'm going to be using 5 by 4.5 inch lug pattern right here. So these are the holes I want the studs in. And of course they say grab an oversized nut to throw over this thing to help press it through. Do they include an oversized nut? No, they do not. All right, I found what I do have is a sacrificial Pittsburgh 19 millimeter that the lug nut seems to ride on. I definitely got the knurls started in the back, so I'll grab an actual 1/2 inch ratchet and finish it up by hand per the instruction video. Let's see, so next up, another stud, another large nut or a spacer, which I'm using just a 19 mil because that actually sets under the lug nut I've been using for this perfectly. So we'll spin this thing back on, and they say again, don't use an impact wrench for whatever reason. So I'm not using a ratchet, and it takes forever and seems archaic, but we'll try and follow their rules, see how it works out. And the answer is not very easily. It appears what's happening is my backing oversize wrench here is tightening up on the thing. But what I'm discovering is if I tighten down, I can use both of these to turn this thing. And that seems to be letting it pull through. And being that this is more or less my bolt-on Jeep, I'm trying to avoid the urge to run over to my press and just press these things in, but that would definitely get it done a lot faster. And I believe we've got that one all the way in now. This little Pittsburgh wrench though is probably never going to be the same. So 2 down and 1 more to go. I'll move around here to the other side for this one so I get a better angle on it. this way does seem to be working pretty well. So I'm almost wondering if I was using a larger backing nut, if I need to put like a boxed in or an open end wrench on it to be able to do the same thing. I might not, but anyway, it's now done. I don't think it messed up my little 19 mil Pittsburgh special. You can see all 3 studs are in there very well now. So the next piece of this that I picked up at a Simplify Life is the RockHard license plate adapter. So this is to relocate my license plate from down here to here. Because also in the plans are replacing the factory tail lights with some of the flesher style. So I'll be relocating my license plate to here, and also mounting a 3rd brake light, the license plate light, and then on top of that I intend to mount a quick detach backup camera as well. Next up will be set the adapter for the JK wheels on top of this. And it looks like the little set screws. Definitely gonna have to come out of here to be able to work with this. And what I've been doing on this adapter spacer is torquing these down just to the standard torque for the lug nuts. So I'll grab the torque wrench and crank it up to 90 foot-pounds. That part's done. So now I have the tire carrier mounted in the next to rearmost position. It has to have a couple bolts holding it, that's why it's kind of floppy. Have the license plate adapter backing plate, which will go through the center. Have the TJ to JK adapter mounted. And now we're ready to put a tire on. All right, we'll see how well this thing lifts up on here. First though, I'll need to punch out the little Jeep center trim cap. Well, at least that part went easy. It does mount this thing up pretty high, and after looking at the clearance on the back side, I'm going to go ahead and put this mounting plate on the thing all the way to the rear and see if I can get it back just a little bit farther. If you can see the gap I've got between the two. So it's a pretty good gap between the tire. And with this thing up on jack stands, be prepared to use some upper body strength to get that tire up there. And I can tell you right now that tightening this thing down is going to require a couple of boxed in wrenches, as there's no way you're getting a socket on these rearmost positions. And knowing I can't go back any farther, I'm going to go ahead and grab my washers, get them set up on here. Instead of using the rearmost hole, I will find one of the slightly forward bolt holes. Now I can get everything on. So can't use the rear, can use the forwards. So now try and fish around up underneath here. You actually have to lift the bolt out a little ways to get things started. Same with the nut. Alright, so the first side's done. Drop another washer on. Get the backing washer, another lock washer. And get the passenger side started in here. I'll finally get the threads to engage. And I got two more to do slightly forward. Probably do them in the next to last position again, just to get room to get a wrench on there solidly. So instead of the rearmost, I'm going to use the next one forward. This time I'll start on the passenger side. So we'll grab a 5/8 for the outer, the top side, and 11/16 wrench for the backing nuts. We'll get this thing finished up. And for these rear rims, you will need an open end wrench to get underneath there and on these things. And with that, I believe we have our tire carrier installed. So we'll get the spare back up on here. And that did definitely take out a lot of the space behind the thing. So I'll grab the lug nuts for the spare, go ahead and get it zipped down back on here. And that wheel adapter I'm using, one set came with the lug nuts to hold it on, so I'm using 2 of those. And then I also have the three factories holding it in there. So if I get stuck on the road, lose a lug nut, whatever, I do have some extras available right at the rear of my Jeep. And the tire is now on. And I'm still not making contact with that little plastic or hard rubber puck on the bottom. My license plate adapter pin comes out through the center hub section with plenty of clearance to get the cross pin through, probably on the rear, which didn't come with the cross pin, but I'm going to pick one up. And it's got the set screw on the back. Come around to the back and you can see the distance between the tire at the bottom. There's a little bit of a gap there. And then on the slider puck at the bottom, it still doesn't come down and sit on top of that thing. And again, that is with going back to 2 shims only on the hinge. So probably end up having to run this thing for a couple weeks, see if I get any squeaks, rattles, or any other type of movement or motion back here. And even if I don't, if it doesn't settle down more, I'm going to end up either shimming this up a notch. I noticed on some of their other videos and some of the replacement parts, it almost looks like this is bigger on some of the other versions, or taller, I should say. And we'll open the thing up, give it a shove close, see how it latches. So it does swing out easily. Tailgate does open quite easily. Tailgate shuts no problem. And so does the swing arm, but you can definitely see it rattle around a little bit. So I'm probably going to need to go ahead and shim this thing up to get that solidness they were talking about with it. I'm not sure how much I'm going to have to shim. I mean, it's not a huge gap, but there's probably at least a couple body washers on each side underneath this thing. So I may go ahead and do that right now just to try and be done with it. All right, that's a 3/8 backing it up. And these are self-drilling, self-tapping that are in here. They have plenty of thread on them though. So I'll find some washers, see if I can bring this thing up a little higher, and we'll get these things back in here. All right, I found a couple that are gonna bring it up a little bit. I don't know if it's gonna be enough. If it's not, what I'll probably end up doing is buying a piece of 1/8 inch flat bar, cutting it to fit, drilling the holes to match, and then using that as a spacer. But for now, we'll give this a try, see if it works. Still has a little bit of a gap there. Not a lot, but it doesn't contact that first. So if I can grab 2 more washers to put in for now, then I'll just plan on getting that strap to put in later. So back to my spare parts bin from previous projects, see if I can find a couple more washers close to matching these. And if they clear, I got a couple more body washers. I'm gonna try and stack on top of the thicker ones. And these should bring it up just a tiny little bit. So let's try this one more time. And now, I don't know if the mic will pick it up. So you can actually hear it hitting the little bumper. And if you look through here, I mean, it barely catches on the passenger side and rides up on there. So this may be well enough. It definitely sets on there when it's closed now. And like I say, a piece of 1/8 inch flat bar I think will take care of making this a more permanent solution. But for now, I would say this is good enough to be permanent as well. So that may be something I just add to the to-do list. So last piece, I'll go ahead and slip the license plate adapter in here. And you can see it'll go back where I can get a cross pin through there to kind of lock that in place. Could potentially even put one through the front, stick it out a little bit more. This will bring it back flush with the tire. Then for the moment, I'm just going to put in a little set screw here. Get it back where the hole lines up. Reach in here and tighten this thing down. And that pretty much finishes it up. So one tire carrier installed. Still have to get my high lift. I'm going to mount it on the back here. It has a provision to lock the high mount down. One of these is welded in place. The other one is adjustable. Then antenna mount. So if I want to run one of the race radios or put in an old school CB, I'm good. Got the one extra shim under the top to get this cap to come down as low as I would like it. I've got 2 shims on the bottom, which with those 2 shims, you saw I had to shim this thing up about the space of at least one of those shims. In fact, this is one of the shims. And it's just a little bit thicker than one of the shims that I had to shim this up to get the thing to hit when it latches. But it does now close and latch well. Right, that was a little push. Can even just do it by hand. It doesn't have a whole lot of back to front on that latch, and that's with the one factory snubber that I adapted to this top bar. The lower snubber is touching, but maybe not touching quite enough. So I may try another single shim behind that, see if that makes it a little more solid. Because what I don't want is rattles. It doesn't move much, but yeah, I think I'm going to go ahead and put one more of those body washers behind here, see if I can get it to stand off just a hair more to make contact with the back of that. That one extra washer seems to keep the thing like fully locked firmly in place. So setting your spacing on all of this may just be a matter of some trial and error. But you can in fact get this thing where it does not move. The only other thing that I have not attempted that might make a difference, I don't know if I could loosen this thing up and slip it rearward anymore, but I think it was pretty much dead centered. It'd slide around a little bit, and following their instructions on closing the latch, getting it set, opening the latch with no weight on it, bringing it back out, and then tightening this is exactly what I did. So I think for now everything's pretty well in place. I'm going to call it good enough, and it's solid. It's definitely solid. No back and forth movement on it. The upper snubber does still hit with that little bit of extra space, and the lower one definitely does. And if it does loosen over time, I can always add a shim here on the upper snubber to gain a little bit more space and put a little more pressure on it. But for now, I think this part is good. After this, we'll move on probably in the next video to getting the license plate relocated and the wiring for that set up and in place. The rear backup camera is not going to come till later, but it will go with this. And then I will also have tail lights to do soon. So stay tuned for those. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy this kind of stuff, reach down there, hit the like button, hit the subscribe, helps the channel out. And thanks for watching.